Hello, Facebook friends. Our Facebook community, the friends of the Tijuana Estuary Facebook page, I hope you're out there. You're tuning in for another edition of Lunchtime Live. I'll wait a minute to see if we have a small audience at least before I get started with today's Lunchtime Live. I'd like to do a little housekeeping. So for those of you just joining us for Lunchtime Live, I'm Maria here at the Tijuana Estuary for our weekly program where I share this beautiful estuary and the plants and animals that thrive here with you. Hi, Mark. Yes, today I am masked. I'm always masked when I'm on trail and interacting with the other staff, the few staff that work here that are coming in. Today I am off trail, but I am masked up, as we should all be wearing masks during this challenging time. We've just had another round of closures. Didn't affect us because our parking lot and visitor center and restrooms have remained closed, but our trails are still open. And we ask that if you are here enjoying this beautiful space, that you do wear a mask, that you do remain socially distant. And I hope everyone can hear me okay. This is my first time trying this, even though I am off trail. I know we have some helicopters, we have some wind, and we now have a mask. So if you can hear me, you can give me a thumbs up. I'm doing my best to do this so that you can hear me. And I know we had some sound issues last week, which I hope to correct the next time by trying something new. The next time we're off trail in a very windy location. So it looks like I've got some thumbs up and everyone, great. Thanks, Ann. Thanks for that feedback. So I hope you're here today ready to pick up on the Salt Marsh Series. And today we are going to sweat for survival. That's right. So just a real quick recap. We started the Salt Marsh Series with life in a dynamic environment. This extreme environment where salt water from the ocean is filling this place up at high tide twice a day, and species that live here are thriving, although it is a constantly changing environment, which includes high salinity. And plants that live here are adapted for survival as they deal with that salinity. Right. So a couple weeks ago, we introduced one method of survival. Does anyone remember the method of survival we explored a couple of weeks ago with plants like pickleweed and jamea, that's salty Susan? Does anyone remember? And I'll wait a minute for anyone to share their memory recall. If you were here, maybe you weren't here, and if you weren't, we're glad you're here today, and you can go back and look at the prior videos of this Salt Marsh series as we explored what it's like to live in the salt marsh and one method of dealing with salt. And yes, that method was accumulation. Very good, Mark. So we explored we looked at a couple of accumulators, plants that have that storing method, which sounds kind of counterintuitive. If salt is damaging, why would you store it? Well, they have those special cavities, right? So today we are going to take a look at a couple of examples of the other method for dealing with salt. So we looked at accumulators that store in specialized cavities that fill up, and then those parts of the plant fall off. today we have a different method to look at. And that is, I see the word that Bob has given, excrete. So we are excreting for survival, or sweating for survival is another way that we use that to kind of illustrate, because we're all familiar with sweating, and sweating is essentially excreting. So our method of adaptation for dealing with heat, so we don't overheat, is that humans have that ability to sweat. So the water inside our body goes out through our pores, excreted out through our pores. We call that sweat, and that cools us down so that we don't have problems overheating. Well, salt marsh plants, it is a warm environment. It is a beautiful day, by the way. A beautiful day. The wind is blowing, blue sky. Not getting any of that smoke from that fire north of us. So very lovely. But it does get warm, and these plants, they're able to tolerate heat and drying out. But salinity, the sweating that they do, is for the increased salinity that the salt marsh environment holds. So let's get down and take a look at a couple of examples of plants that sweats for survival, and we call those excreters. So accumulators store, excreters excrete or sweat. And we're going to look at a couple of excreters today here on the edge. Again, I'm on at the high marsh area. So, I am off trail. However, I'm not in the salt marsh. That would be a bit too damaging. I would be very muddy and messy, and we don't want to impact the environment that way. So I'm going to use our lovely macro lens again today to explore this, and I will take you guys off of and that's what I'm looking at. You can see there, I'm down off the trail, close to the visitor center, at the edge of the very north end of this salt marsh estuary. We can see Seacoast Drive on the other side there. How many of you know where this exact location is? And there's Imperial Beach Boulevard. How many in our audience today have been here before and walked that trail above me and looked out onto this beautiful salt marsh? Well, I hope you all, if you haven't visited us, that you do when everything is back to normal and it's easy and safe to do so. So we're going to get down on the ground, because these plants, remember, it's tough to live in a salt marsh. Yes, it's tough to live in, and it's so nice when we have our neighbors come and use this place as their backyard to get out, to breathe, to find some relaxation in nature here, and to appreciate this place like we do here. So that's the hope in delivering these programs that we can't do in person, that we share this place and you get a better understanding of this place from home. So again, it's tough to live out here. These plants spend a lot of energy dealing with this dynamic environment. High tides, low tides, high salinity, low salinity, changes in oxygen. So they don't have a lot left over to grow tall. Right? So everything here is fairly low to the ground. So we're going to get low to the ground and take a look at our first salt marsh plant. Now, from this vantage, it might be tough to see that there is a variety of species out here. Not a large number, because everything is roughly the same color. But as we get down and explore, we will see some of those great differences that these plants have. So the first plant we're going to look at is, hi Dick, yes, you are off of 3rd and Caspian and Ivy Boulevard. So we're right here at the end where the piling started, and there was a question last time about what are they for, and those held a sewage pipe. So again, I'll answer questions related to the topic. If something's too off topic, I'll answer it later in the comments. But that is a kind of a landmark here, the sewage pipe pilings there. Of course, there's no longer the sewage pipe there. So I'm here in the corner, northeast corner of this section of Salt Marsh, getting ready to look at our first plant that we have here in the high marsh, called the salt grass. So we're gonna get down just below me here, and we have, you can see, a mix of green and kind of brown dried out plant material. And salt grass, maybe you can see, I'll just stay back a little bit so we can get a good vantage. Hi Judy. Of salt grass. Now we all might be familiar with grass, especially if we have lawns, or been to places with lawns. So this is a plant, salt grass, that's also in the same family, the Poaceae, which is the grass family. And unlike single blades of grass, salt grass has leaves that come off a stem, multiple leaves. You can see it there, looking kind of spiky. All right. Now this is a plant in front of me that's, maybe just a little more than hand high. However, salt grass can get much taller. There's some behind me that's actually probably over a foot or 2 feet. And so again, it's in the Poaceae family. Salt grass, for those of you who like the Latin name, this is the Disticulus spicata. Disticulus spicata, and I will spell these later. This is a perennial plant, perennial grass. Again, can grow up, can get, fairly tall. I even read up to 3 feet. Found in coastal marshes, not just in California, not just native to California, but throughout North America. Coastal marshes throughout North America. So a common native salt marsh grass. Okay. Disticulus spicata salt grass. Now, we talked about sweating for survival. What exactly does that mean? Well, these plants, these excreters, sweating for survival. You have to imagine, even though we're here in the high marsh with a dry ground, these plants do get wet from the highest tides. So the tides are dynamic, they're changing. High and low, not the same height every day, and we've 2 of them a day. So I'm here, obviously, at a lower tide when the ground is not wet. But these plants do get inundated. They do get wet, and that water is salt water. So they're absorbing this with their roots, which we don't see. And they have a very fibrous root system, these grasses. Very fibrous root system. They spread from rhizomes. We talked about that a little bit. So they are send out these runners. Excuse me, which is how they populate an area. They will produce seed, but the seeds are not as successful in germinating and spreading this plant as the rhizomes. But imagine you're soaking it up through your roots, that's salt water. Just like the accumulators, taking it in, moving it up through the stem, and then you have to have some method to deal with it so that it does not damage your tissues, your plant, the plant that you are, right? So instead of storing it and having developed specialized cavities, vacuoles for storing the salt, they sweat the salt, and we can see that today. So I'm going to put on that macro lens, and you can imagine if you're sweating salt and water, oops. There we go. Sorry, but whoop. I will get this right. There we go. Apologize there. If you're sweating salt and water, and if we know anything about evaporation, water evaporates and salt crystals get left behind. So I'm going to move this around a little bit. And if you can see that sparkly, substance on the leaves of the salt grass, not too difficult to see where the name came from. Salt grass on the blades of leaves. So water evaporates, salt crystals get left behind. Excreters will show salt crystals after excretion, but it's not guaranteed that we will see this, because we do have coastal fog that, as we know about salt, if you've ever diluted salt in water, you know it dilutes, it dissolves, and it goes away. So it can fall off, it can get washed off from rain events or coastal fog. But until that happens, we can see those salt crystals, and I'm doing my best to show this to you with that macro lens. So there we go. And now if I rub my fingers, I have this grittiness. And oops, a little too close there. You may be able to see the salt crystals in my fingers. And sometimes these salt crystals can get pretty big. Like, for example, there we go. You can see those. Those are pretty big. Yes, there are some salt crystals on the leaves of the saltgrass. And I scoped this out a little earlier just to hoping, because it's not guaranteed we're going to see salt crystals. Excreters excrete, but they don't necessarily, the salt doesn't necessarily stay on there forever. It can get dissolved in coastal fog, heavy marine layers, and or the wind can blow it off. So there we have our salt grass, Disticulus spicata. You can see some stems there, how it branches. The leaves branch there. Not a tall plant, not a big plant. Now this salt grass, I didn't know this, but it's food for a couple of important species. I mentioned that this is found in marshes, coastal marshes in North America, so not just here. apparently there's an endangered Florida salt marsh vole that eats this plant. So it supports the endangered Florida salt marsh vole. It's also a larval food for the wandering skipper butterfly, for you entomologists out there. So for you entomologists who are like those insect species, by the way, there's some bees, little bees flying around here, which I was trying to get some photos earlier of. I've never seen them before. Bright yellow wings, beautiful bee. Trying to stay out of their way, because I believe they're ground nesting here, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the wandering skipper butterfly, the larval stage, feeds on the saltgrass, Disticulus spicata. And I'll take this off so you can see again. Disticulus spicata here in the high marsh. This is a perennial grass. It does die back. We can see some of the yellow older grass here, but it's still quite green. Still quite green. Can handle the drought. Can handle that salinity by excreting that salt, getting rid of it. And you can imagine if you're doing that, your characteristics are your leaf is going to be relatively thin because you're not holding in that concentrated salt water like accumulators, which feel more swollen. These guys feel a little more, these are a little more thin. The leaves are a little more thin, like a blade of grass between my, now here's one of those bees. See if you guys can see that bee. Oop, well, that's tough. They're moving around. All right, so there we go. I hope that Disticulus spicata, salt grass, you got a good feel for what that plant might be like. Again, this is a very common salt marsh grass in North America. So coastal marshes, East Coast, West Coast, you may have seen this plant before because it's in the high marsh. So if you have access to trails near a marsh, you may have seen this plant before. I'm going to show you another one, also here in the high marsh. Sometimes goes into the mid-marsh, I believe. That's very close by. We'll just move a little bit over this way. And you may have noticed it. I think someone noticed it 2 weeks ago when we were looking at accumulators, but we didn't discuss it because it's not an accumulator. And it's this more bushy plant, another perennial in front of me here. You can see that it goes, 5-6 feet across, this bushy, moundy plant, taller than the saltgrass here. However, really is not, this is kind of one of the taller individuals. There's a bit more here of that bushy perennial herb, salt marsh, that is commonly called alkali heath. Alkali heath. Or, to be more scientific, more botanist terms, Frankenia salina. Frankenia salina. And we're going to get a little closer to Frankenia salina here at the high marsh. If you're tuning in for the Salt Marsh Series, Lunchtime Live, Excreting for Survival, we are now looking at our second excreter, alkali heath, Frankenia salina. And I'm looking around because I came out earlier And I'm looking for something, a good section, part of this plant to illustrate this unique method of survival. Here we go. All right, so you can see quite a bit of Frankenia salina here, flourishing in shades of green, but you can see it's also starting to go a little bit dormant because semi-summer deciduous, meaning the leaves will fall. Some of them, they start to go brown, but it's still, a lot of it's got that healthy green color. So hopefully you guys can see this. It's not too pixelated. And you're seeing that kind of more shrubby looking plant here, the Frankenia salina alkali heath. And if there's anybody that's noticing here a color other than green, feel free to shout it out. Green or yellow or brown. Maybe you can see that this plant right now is in its flowering stage. It's in its flowering stage. Yes, pink blooms. Pink, sometimes they were described as white. I've never seen white here. However, we see pink blooms when alkali heath is flowering. Again, flowers spring, summer, early fall. These beautiful pink flowers. And we'll get a little closer with our macro. Get my macro on there. Oops. Hard to see with the glare here. Thanks for your patience. All right, so we've got our macro lens on there. You can see our pink blooms in the Frankenia salina, of the Frankenia salina alkali heath. More shrubby, more woody stemmed, red stems. You see that? Red stems. Many more smaller leaves that look almost succulent-like characteristic of an excreter. However, I mean, these one out. See, what you're seeing is that they are curled and they look succulent-like. But if they were to flatten out, and they're so tiny, it's very difficult to do that unless I find a large one. Like over here. Actually, we'll go over here, because we can also see, not only do we see a flattened leaf, but we may be able to see, oops, those salt crystals. Can you see the salt crystals? It's a little tough with the glare and the wind, but maybe you can see that there. I hope you can see that there. Salt crystals on the leaf. I try to find some bigger leaves here. And when I say big, we're talking, a centimeter or so long. Yes, like white frosting, Bob. Yes, it's very much like white frosting, or these are the residual salt that gets left behind after evaporation takes the water molecules away, which started inside the plant. So up through the roots, these plants, again, through their roots and those woody stems, They are absorbing that salt water from the highest tides that saturate the soil, moving that salt up and through pores in the leaves, just like we have. They excrete that salt out, getting rid of it so that the survival can continue and the plant is not damaged by salt. And if this method for dealing with salt, this adaptation did not occur, it was not present, these plants would not survive. They do not like and need salt water. They just have a method for dealing with it. So let me take that macro lens off so we can get a nice look again at these plants. No scent, tiny pink flowers. Look for them in the spring or summer. Look for that salt excretion throughout. Another perennial here in the high marsh that has some winter dormancy. It's just looking so good these days. We had to do the Salt Marsh Series while the plants were really showing off this way. So there you go. Excreting or sweating for survival in the salt marsh. Now, one plant I would love to have shown you, but it's just too far out there. But it is one we love here somewhere. We love them all. But it's the cordgrass, and I just don't know if I can take you guys to this cordgrass through zooming. But it is that tall grass out there blowing in the wind. There's some right here by the piling, a few pieces of cordgrass. And that is, maybe we discussed this in a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And that is a low marsh plant, critical salt marsh plant, a low marsh salt marsh plant, critical for the survival of the light-footed ridgeways rail, the endangered resident species, almost like a mascot of the Tijuana estuary. And it too, with its salt crystals excreting away. If we could get out there, we might be able to see that. So, but that is too far for us to go today. It's not something that we can do during nesting season or easily, because it is a low marsh plant, which means a lot of mud and a lot of water. All right. Oops. So there I am. And there we are. Another episode of Lunchtime Live here from the Salt Marsh. Rounding out the Salt Marsh series, and we might have one more. I haven't decided yet. I need to check on something. I may have one more for Salt Marsh series. But these programs will continue. It's just like I look forward to this weekly. It's my way to interact with you, to share the estuary with you. Our local folks, they come out here, they can see this, but they don't get this kind of interpretation, this kind of sharing of the resource, because we are only doing this virtually. So it's wonderful to see you all. I thank you. I appreciate you tuning in. Any questions, any more comments, feel free to share them in the comments later. I will be following up on those. So have a great day, everyone. And we will see you either on the websites, on our Facebook pages, Instagram, YouTube, or back live next week for Lunchtime Live. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day.